Okay. We don't have to have it really close?
No, it should be.
Well,
Well, I think it's fair. Are we ready?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I've got 1 o'clock, so we're ready to get started. So I'll be moderating and introducing today's speakers. We've got the Ames City Hall campus stormwater improvements, and we've got 3 speakers. We've got Tracy Warner, Ryan Benjegerdes, and Jake Moore, and I'll quickly introduce them. So Tracy Warner is a municipal engineer with the Public Works Department for the City of Ames. She leads a public works engineering team on transportation, water, sanitary sewer, stormwater, flood mitigation, and GIS projects from concept through construction. And she's been with the city since 2003. Ryan is a water resource engineer for Bolton Menk, working in their Ames office. He's a graduate of ISU Civil Engineering and is a licensed PE, as well as a certified floodplain manager. His primary responsibilities include stormwater management, planning and design, floodplain management analysis, bridge and culvert design, and permitting. Ryan has completed numerous stormwater management designs for both public and private clients throughout Ames and central Iowa. And Jake Moore is a stormwater specialist with the Public Works Department of the City of Ames. He works with the MS4 program, which involves various duties including plan review, permitting, public outreach, inspections, and cost share programs. Jake also manages the City of Ames right-of-way restoration program, and he's been with the city for 10 years. On his free time, he enjoys spending time taking pictures, working on household projects, and playing with his 3 kids.
Oh, Mike, before you pass it on, could you introduce yourself?
And my name is Mike Perez. I am a civil engineering professor here at Iowa State University, and I just joined last fall, so I'm new to everything here. I'm learning too.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Well, welcome to Ames, and we are honored to be able to provide some information about a project, actually an award-winning project we just found out, so we have that award up here. And greatly appreciate that from everybody that reviewed our application. So the City of Ames is in central Iowa. As you are here, we welcome you, and definitely welcome you to go see our project, which is at City Hall. So the City of Ames, if you've experienced Ames over the years or seen it on the news, we do experience community flooding. We do have a major creek as well as several tributaries to that. We have a river, and that confluence is right here in the middle of Ames, and so we have experienced community flooding significantly over the years, and probably more frequently than we prefer. I do know that. So over the times, and this will show you the flood stages, it really gets in our face. You know, we are faced with water. Now what are we going to do? So over the years, that has been a focus of ours to lower those floodwaters. So as engineer, I'm an engineer, we really did take that approach of you see the water, you want to get it away as fast as you can. Well, that gets it in the streams, it gets it away. The citizens then are happy because they don't see the water and they're not panicking. But what it does is also contributes to our poor water quality, and out of sight, out of mind. It also, unfortunately, degrades the streams. So with the adoption of the new Iowa Stormwater Management Manual, we worked to adopt a new stormwater ordinance in 2014 and really looked at what do we need as a community? What do we need to decrease some of that flooding? What do we need to do to improve the quality of our streams? And so what we decided was we didn't take stormwater back to just a pre-developed, so the difference between pre-developed and post-developed, but we took it back to that pre-settlement. So they design it back to that meadow in good condition with a runoff curve number of 58. The water quality was also something that was very important to us. So as you also heard during the presentation, we wanted to hold ourselves to the same standard. Our parking lot needed to be reconstructed. The pavement had failed. It was in smaller pieces of asphalt that were held together, but definitely needed to be reconstructed. But we wanted to hold ourselves to that same standard. So what we did was look at what we required of the developers, what we required, and as far as our MS4 permit, what we're continuing to educate and talk to the citizens and talk to developers about. We wanted to hold ourselves to that same standard. So we've been implementing some water quality features around town on some of the street projects. So we've done bioretention cells on 24th Street when we reconstructed that, along Ridgewood, Blackwood Circle that's mentioned there, as well as Billy Sunday, is portions of permeable pavement. So we've been doing a little bit at a time as far as the infrastructure on the streets. But we wanted to make sure that we were, again, looking at that stormwater management requirements that we had of the developers. And so we looked at water quality protection, 1.25 inches per acre, of making sure that that was going to be that first flush of nutrients off the and sediments off the parking lot, that we were going to capture that and treat that. And then we were also concerned about the water quality. So not only from the standpoint of that first flush, but also from the smaller floods, the smaller flashiness in our streams, that we were going to make sure that we addressed that along with the extreme floods. So we also have had very much, this is just one example, but we've experienced even where we got 6 inches of rain in 2 hours on a north part of Ames. So when I talk about the river flooding, it's also isolated with some of that localized area as well. So we wanted to make sure that we are having that safe conveyance to the streams, but also not eroding the streams further. So we created what was considered a master plan of our campus. So City Hall is an old school in town that we had done a bond issue and renovated for city offices. And as you can see, we have several parking lots. So the project focused here on the west side, and what you can see is it's just about as large as the City Hall building. So we are talking a large footprint as far as putting down new pavement. If we had just done that, put it in the storm sewer, straight to the stream, less than a mile from City Hall is Squaw Creek, and it just discharged directly to Squaw Creek. So what were we going to do to help that? And so we looked at all these different components of the permeable pavers in the parking spaces, the bioretention cells, soil quality restoration. Let's get our landscape to work and get that to absorb more, and using the native turf so that we're not putting down more of the nutrients. I'm not going to attempt, even though I work with him regularly, I'm not going to attempt to say Ryan's last name either.
Does that work? Okay. So we worked with the city to design this project, and there's a number of design criteria that needed to be met in order to meet the ordinance. First, of course, we had to provide the required detention, like Tracy said, to take that post-development release rate down to pre-settlement, which was mimicking basically a meadow. We also had to capture and treat the water quality volume. As you can see from this table, there was a significant amount of flow reduction required. The pre-settlement release rates were quite low, and developed without stormwater management in place would have been a big impact on the site and its downstream. The next challenge was that there was really a limited amount of space on the site to incorporate standard detention practices. And then thirdly, there was 2 off-site areas that passed through the site that needed to be accounted for. So there are a few alternatives that were generally considered. First, we could take the easy way out, and the city could grant themselves an exception from their ordinance, which obviously did not align with the city's values. Secondly, we could pursue off-site detention measures and only do the water quality volume treatment on site. Or thirdly, which is what the city's goals, aligned with the city's goals, was to provide detention on site via subsurface storage. And so we looked at storage chambers, just, manufactured storage chambers, or we looked at providing that storage within the voids within the subbase. And that's ultimately what we chose. It was more cost effective on this project. So I'll just touch briefly on each of the design components of the project. We implemented permeable pavers. Basically, we put those in the parking lanes, and they captured runoff from most of the parking lot. The drive aisles, everything drained to the permeable pavers. That was the primary method for capturing that runoff and bringing it into that rock storage subbase that we were relying on for detention. Jake will talk more about their construction, but they were set on, it was typical paver construction, set on a crushed stone bed with rock chip joints, or in the joints. And then so beneath that permeable pavement, we had some larger rock storage areas. Those were placed at the low points in the parking lot, and then we had a subdrain to drain that water into the storm sewer system. We would vary the depth of that rock subbase based on the drainage area that was coming to it in order to meet the required runoff rates. And like I said, we had a subdrain in place to outlet it into the storm sewer system. At the end of that subdrain, we had some outlet control structures, because without controlling that release rate at the outlet, we would have violated that allowable pre-settlement runoff rate, which was very strict. So those outlet structures, we ended up fitting basically a PVC T to the end of the subdrain where it entered the manhole. And it's basically a T on its side, capped the bottom, drilled a hole through it, since we were talking about really small runoff rates. And so that small hole drilled through the bottom was able to control the 1-year rate. We cut a notch through the side to control the 5 and 10-year runoff rates. And then the 100-year was able to spill over the top of that T down in the manhole. And also on the site, like Tracy said, we incorporated some bioretention cells. Those were basically used to capture any runoff that wasn't going in through the permeable pavers, primarily from the drive aisles. Water would enter the bioretention cells through curb cuts in the curb, and then we'd place some rain guardians on a number of those curb cuts so that they provide pre-treatment to kind of keep the debris from getting into the bioretention cell, make it easy to pull out. Oh, and then overflow would go through a riser pipe into the storm sewer system. And so that storm sewer system existing, it went through the site, and it served as a stormwater main for a large upstream watershed. And so we bypassed that storm sewer to come where we needed to through the site to align with the biocells. And just connected to that, like I said, we upsized it a little bit since we added length and reduced the pipe slope. And then our second off-site run-on that we had to deal with was from the adjacent parking lot to the west. The existing site that would drain through our project site, and we didn't want that to overwhelm our designed bioretention cells and our designed BMPs. So what we did was we added some trench drain to capture that and route it into its own bioretention cell, where it was then transferred to the storm sewer system without having to mix with our project site. There's a picture of the trench drain. And so that worked to effectively prevent that off-site runoff from mixing with our site. So ultimately, the design allowed the site to meet its restrictive pre-settlement release rates. It accommodated the passage of all the off-site flow, and we had plenty of water quality volume treatment because that subbase was all designed to store up to the 100-year event. And so that 1.25 inches really wasn't, that just came as part of it. So then Jake will talk about some of the construction on the project.
All right, can you hear me?
All right. So Tracy touched on why we did the project. We wanted to meet our 5B ordinance. Ryan talked a little bit about the design. I'm going to talk about the construction. So I thought I'd start off with the scheduling. So really it was a 7-month project. Really took about 3 months for, when I think about the project, I think about it as kind of the north half and the south half. So we split the parking lot in half. So it took about 3 months for each one of those halves. So started in April, finished in October. We have a few things left that we have to finish up this spring. We have to finish up some soil quality restoration, some native seeding, just because of the dates and the warm weather. It's a warm weather seed, so or vegetation. So in order to plant that, we'll have to wait until May. So as for the parking lot, it's functional. We just have to add a second chip to it. When it got bid, there were two layers of chip placed in it. So I think they did that to give it a little bit of time to get that first chip to work down into the pavers, and so we'll add a second chip here in about a month. So as for parking, it's one of those things that you don't really think about until you say, well, we're doing this big parking lot, we need to figure out a place for city employees to park at. So we were doing away with around 90 spaces, I believe, with each section. So let me get my pointer working here. So if you can see, here's the cutoff line right here in the middle. That's where we divided the site. So we had listed as 3 phases, but 2 main phases. The first phase was just some storm sewer right here. And so, which also, this area was torn out. So in order to get the public parking here, we had to build a ramp to get people across. So we kept this as public parking. What did we do with all the city staff? Oh, see here. So we had to come up with where do we put city staff? We had 100 vehicles that we need to figure out a place to put them. So a couple ideas that came up and worked pretty well. First of all, we worked through city employees with email for the most part. So send it out. We'd send out a mass email to everybody, whenever we were going to change the parking scheme. So if we're going to do, for like tree removal and that type of thing, we'd send out a note and say, hey, we're going to work on trees, or we're going to work on this. So that we communicated through email. But for temporary parking, what we came up with is we talked to Fairway, which is about a block away. And Fairway was okay with us parking some cars at Fairway. The other thing that we did is we have an east lot, a lot that's on the east side of City Hall that has meters in it. So we bagged the meters and we had city employees park in that lot as well. And then we also moved some of our city vehicles out to like our warehouse. And then people would drive their personal vehicles to the warehouse and then bring that vehicle into City Hall. So it did away with a lot of extra vehicles that are typically, one individual may have 2 vehicles, and it brought it down to 1. So by doing that, we were able to fit everybody in on the lot. Safety fence, before we got things started, the goal was to keep everybody able to walk on the sidewalks. It is City Hall, so we have a lot of foot traffic. So one of our goals was to keep the sidewalks open. So on the west side of City Hall, there's a sidewalk right along the west side of the building. We put up more of a permanent type safety fence that was up for 3 months, and then once they completed the north side of the lot, they just basically unscrewed that, they put it down with Tapcons, and they slid everything to the south. And so it worked great because they could use it twice, and it kept people out of the construction site. As for, we have a sidewalk on the north side of the lot and a sidewalk on the south side. Those were only shut down for maybe 14 days during the entire project. So we did a really good job keeping them open. I have a note here about dumpsters. So it was kind of a forgotten thing until it turned up to be a trash day one day, when we had to get the dumpsters out of City Hall. So we have 2 big roller dumpsters, and we actually had to take part of the fence apart. Luckily, the dumpsters are kind of right in the middle of the site, so it was close to where the fence ended anyway, so we just had to remove a panel of the fence, bring the dumpsters out, and then we left that section loose so that we could dumpsters in and out every week. So. Tree removal, we did have to do tree removal. Most of the existing trees were in the islands of the parking lot, and there was no way to keep the trees. We were taking out so much material, no tree was going to survive. So we removed the trees. We did end up replacing them all with native species. We had the contractor come in. What we did is we actually marked off spots. We did the tree removal before we actually shut down the lot. So we put cones out the night before. We blocked off all the parking spaces to keep cars away from the trees, and then we had the contractor come in on a Saturday and Sunday and remove the trees, just to kind of give them a head start on the project. So, when it came to pavement removal and utility removal. So the interesting thing about this site was, prior to City Hall, it was the school, and then prior to the school, on the west part of the lot, there were some single-family houses. So they demoed the houses, you know, 40 years ago or 50 years ago, they demoed the houses, but they left the foundations. So, and left the utilities. So as they were going through and they were doing the removals, they were hitting all kinds of stuff. So utilities trying to figure out, is it good, is it bad, is it hooked up or not? Also with the, and we knew a lot of that stuff was there, so we bid it in a manner that basically everything came out with the bid. The one thing we did do a change order on was the City Hall, the electric to the building was fed from the west. And you'll see in pictures later on, we got so far down that the main feed had to be taken out. So that was a change order. Luckily we have our own electric department. So they fed it from the north. So everybody inside, nobody had any idea that we were changing throughout the lines. So that was just one of the things we had to change for the bid. So also, I didn't mention it, but light poles. We were going to try to keep the light poles, but once we started removals, we saw that we were going to be so deep that the footings weren't going to hold the light poles. So we ended up pulling light poles down and footings out and replacing them and doing all new. We didn't do new light poles, but we did new footings and we ran new electric. So. Storm sewer, Ryan touched on it. He showed you where the new storm was at, but we removed storm sewer, removed a lot more than what we replaced. So we could get rid of a lot of the drains that were in the parking lot originally because we have all these pervious pavers and we have these biocells. We had a lot more areas for water to drain the water. So we were able to get rid of some of the structures that were on the more eastern side of the parking lot. So less pipe required because of that. So I'm not sure how well you can see from the pictures. It's kind of hard to see the grade, but when they removed the soil they removed the soil to allow for the rock base, and there was a lot of rock. I mean, I think the north side, it was up to 27 inches in some spots, and then it kind of tapered down. On the south half, I think it was 15 or 14 inches, and then it tapered down. So you'll see the pictures of the rock here in a minute, but a lot of material came out. And it was sloped in a manner that everything would drain towards the medians. So it's not like we had a flat bottom to work with, and we were saying, hey, we're doing 15 inches of rock throughout the entire thing. Everything was sloped and everything changed. So you might have 5 inches of rock in one area and 12 inches in another. So yeah, the rock depth changed based on the grade. So here's a good picture that shows the 3 different sizes of rock. We did a number 2 stone for the flood storage, which was the majority of the rock that came on the site. And then another stone, it's more like a 1-inch clean, which was at 57. And we did about 4 inches of that as a choker layer. And then where the pavers were going to be at, in order to screed the pavers and get a nice flat surface for the pavers to lay them down, then we did a smaller stone. It was more like a chip. So, and then you can see in the picture them starting to push rock. We did do new curb and gutter throughout the site. So we thought we didn't want a new parking lot without new curb and gutter. So we ended up, and I don't know how you'd do it without removing the curb and gutter now after seeing the construction. So we did new curb and gutter throughout the site. In order to set that curb and gutter with all that rock, you needed to have about 2 feet of rock in addition to the curb and gutter. So the site really grew by about 4 feet, 2 foot on 2 foot on each side. So we did a paver restraint, and this right here is the paver restraint. And what that does is the separation beam between where you'll see here in a minute, but where the pavers are being laid at, in that section right there is where the pavers are going to be laid. We didn't want the pavers up against the asphalt, so we put concrete, a separation beam between the asphalt and the pavers. So, and then when the contractor originally tried to dig the basins, they thought they would dig them before they did the curb and gutter. Well, what we found out is that we couldn't do that. We had to wait and do the curb and gutter first, because we needed that 2 foot of rock behind the curb and gutter to support it while it was being poured. And then so afterwards we had to come back in after the curb and gutter was down and dig those out. So. Just some pictures of the biocells. We did 5 of them on site. We did basically 3 on the west side of the parking lot, and then we did 2 on the south end. The 2 on the south end, it looks like one, but it's separated by a berm. Ryan tells me that they function separately, so I believe him. So. With the pavers, we did engineered soil or mended soil. Again, they're dug after paving. They have a stone base, and then the rock on the bottom, and then about 9 to 15 inches, we placed a tile so that water, some water will infiltrate into the ground, not all the water will run off. And then we planted with native plants and then covered with wood mulch. Now in the pictures here, like the bottom left, we got that rain before we got any mulch put down, so we had just planted, so there was no mulch down. If you look at that top right picture, you can see this is the section, we had the school students plant separate sections. So we had, when we did plantings, and I'll get to the plantings, but we had the school do part of it and we had a contractor do part of it. So the school had already come in and this part here had mulch on it because they had already planted that. So we did soil quality restoration throughout the entire site, all the green areas. We have to finish some of that up this spring when we're going to do the eco-turf seeding. 2 inches of compost, tilled it in with a big tiller behind a tractor, so roughly 8 inches deep. We tipped the medians. The medians are graded so that the center was the low spot, so that we don't get runoff from the medians. Actually, it runs back into the center, which is where the trees are planted. So once we got to this point in construction, I felt pretty good about it. We were seeing progress. It was really neat to see them lay the pavers. They had a really cool machine that they had gotten. You can see here they had this little mini hoe, and all the pavers came on pallets, and they could just swing their hoe over and grab the pallet or the box, and then swing it back over and set them down. And then they basically just a couple guys would tap them in with some mallets. So it went pretty quick. I think that was the first time that they had used that machine, so they had a couple-day learning curve. But once they got moving, they went pretty quick. I think, I think they did each lot in about 2 weeks, each half. So maybe a month worth of laying pavers in total. So bottom right, you can see the chip that they put on. So that was the first layer of chip. They put it down like that, and then they hand broomed it, and then they also brought in a walk-behind broom and broomed it, I don't know, maybe a dozen times to try to get all that chip into the rock. For asphalt, we did a 4-inch base and we did a 2-inch surface. And you can see there I just listed the highest amount of rock underneath the asphalt. Now it's interesting with having that much rock, it's how do you compact it, or how do you get a good base for your asphalt. We put a roller on it, an asphalt roller, and we just roll it as they put the rock in. Even when they go over it with larger equipment, I mean, when your rock is that deep, it is difficult to get it compacted. But we tried the best that we could to get a good solid base for that asphalt. So painting the lines, this was a discussion that we had among staff of what color do we want to paint the lines. We just built this beautiful parking lot and we have these nice pavers. And do we want to put down a regular white or yellow paint, or do we want to do something a little different? And so we decided to go with a red colored paint, and it's pronounced enough that when you pull in you can see the lines, but when you stand back a little ways it just kind of disappears, and it looks really nice with the site. With native plants, for the eco-turf around the site, we did buffalo grass and blue grama, but they called it an eco-turf. We did 1,900 native plants throughout the site, plus what the school brought, which was about another 400 plants. And we had around 100 students come help plant plants. In order to keep those plants organized and get them put in the right spot, we color-coded everything. So we went throughout the site and we put markers on which plants go where. Ryan had touched on this, but just how the water gets into the controls. We have curb cuts. So we have a curb cut here, and then we have a rain guardian here, and then you have your trench drain here. So, and then of course you have your pavers where it drains in. And just a couple lessons that we learned. One that I'm working through right now is just to make sure that you have a watering plan. When you're planting that many plants, make sure you have a watering plan. So I've already talked to our parks department. They've told me that if it does get dry this spring, that they'd be willing to come out and water the stuff that the students planted. The other plants that the contractor planted, those have a 1-year warranty. So we're going to leave that up to the contractor to figure out how to keep those alive and get them going. So, be ready for outreach. So one thing we learned, we did a lot of Facebook Live, and we did the newspaper was there taking pictures and that type of thing. So just make sure you warn your contractors, let them know, hey, there may be people on site with cameras, and to be courteous to everybody, and just give them a little warning. With seating, I'm going to run out of time, so I'll speed this up real quick. But just with seating, it would have been nice if we could have had the project with 2 separate contracts, one for seating and plants and closed out the other one last fall. So, and some of the materials, it was just, we had some trouble finding some of the materials, some of the decorative rock. So just make sure materials are available, and then just make sure everybody's clear on the design of the plan. You know, we had one area where there was a little bit of confusion on the grading of the site, and so we had to actually come back after we looked at quantities and come back and make it a little bit larger and add some of the amended soil to it. So, okay, and Tracy's just going to finish up real quick with the eligible funding.
So the project was, this touches a bit on each of the different components of the project and what eligible portion it was. We were very fortunate to receive some SRF-sponsored project funds, as well as WQI funds through IDOS. And so we greatly appreciate the partnership that we had with the staff, that we could work with them and continue to talk about the eligible portion. Those funding sources were great assets to have, but it didn't begin to enable us to be able to complete this project. So fortunately, we had a lot of support from our city management and public works director and the city council, and we supplemented that with some general funds and some stormwater utility funds. And so ultimately, this shows the cost of the project, right about $1.2 million. And so we did a time-lapse video of the construction. We put a camera on top of City Hall, and we were able to capture the construction and watch it in a 2-minute video. Don't you wish all your projects could be constructed that fast? I do want to thank Ryan and Jake for their hard work on this project. It was a big project to tackle for our community and for our department, and we got a lot of feedback. You know, our customers, a lot of the time, they're the citizens, but this time our employees were the customers, and so, you know, just walking by somebody in the hall, Jake would get caught to answer questions and you know, a little more conversation than usual. So I also want to thank Bob Kidron and John Joyner, our Assistant City Manager and Public Works Director, are here as well. So appreciate them coming to support us as well.